Every attorney in the city said no, not because Vivian had done anything wrong, but because Harrison Mercer's money had gotten there first. 6 lawyers, 6 conflicts of interest, 6 doors slammed in her face. On the morning of the hearing, Vivian
Here
sat
it
in
is.
her car in a parking garage for
everything.
45 minutes.
Thank you, Amber.
Unable
This
to go
changes
home,
everything.
Harrison had changed the locks. Unable to call her mother,
Telling the truth.
he had blocked the number.
child Vivian is
Unable
carrying
to
is
pay
not
for a
his.
hotel room that
It's
felt
my
like anything
brother's.
other than a holding
He
cell.
confessed everything
8
to
months
me.
pregnant,
On the charge of
completely
willful
alone.
neglect, we
And she
find
walked
in
in
favor
anyway.
of the plaintiff.
She sat down at that defendant's table.
won.
She placed her
This is
hands
a
flat on the
huge
cold
victory.
wood. She looked across the aisle at the man who had systematically dismantled her entire life, and she did not leave. What happened in that courtroom over the next 24 hours would shock every single person in that gallery, because Vivian wasn't as alone as Harrison believed, and she wasn't as broken as he needed her to be. The strongest thing she did wasn't win the case. It was showing up. Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's walking into the room anyway. Even when everything inside you is shaking, if you've ever had to be brave when no one was watching, odd that this story is for you. Like, share, and subscribe. We tell stories of women who refuse to disappear.
Remember that you are so much stronger than you think, and the people who love you most are often fighting wars on your behalf that you know nothing about. The chair next to Vivian was empty, but Harrison Mercer was laughing, and the sound filled the entire courtroom. It was that familiar laugh, the one he always used at dinner parties when a joke was not nearly as funny as the person telling it thought. It was polished, rehearsed, and incredibly cruel. Vivian pressed her hands down flat on the defendant's table, feeling the cold wood against her skin. The fluorescent lights overhead caught the sparkle of her wedding ring. For some reason, she was still wearing it. She stood there, 8 months pregnant, completely alone, and facing off against the top family law firm in the entire state. Across from her, Harrison was surrounded by 3 lawyers in identical dark gray suits. Bradford Whitmore, the third, sat in the middle, a man with perfect, silver hair, flawless posture, and a reputation for completely dismantling his opponents before the lunch break. Harrison leaned over to his lawyer, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear, because he wanted it to be heard. Did she really believe she could just walk in here without a lawyer? He shook his head slowly. This is almost too easy. A low murmur spread through the people watching. Vivian could feel their eyes on her, a mix of pity, curiosity, and entertainment. In the front row, Constance Mercer, Harrison's mother, sat with a string of pearls around her neck and a look of pure satisfaction on her face. She had never truly liked Vivian. That smile was all the confirmation Vivian needed of what she had suspected for 6 long years. Constance had been waiting for this exact moment. Vivian instinctively moved a hand to her stomach. The baby moved inside her, a tiny foot pushing against her ribs. I know, she thought to the child. I know you are scared too. The courtroom had the faint smell of old books and lemon-scented polish. Someone in the back let out a dry cough. The air conditioner was humming just a little too loudly. Every sensation felt painfully sharp, too bright, and far too real. Only 3 weeks earlier, Vivian had a lawyer named Jennifer Walsh, a woman with a fantastic reputation and 20 years of experience. After meeting with her twice, Vivian had started to feel a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. But then Jennifer had called her. I am so sorry, Mrs. Mercer, but a conflict of interest has suddenly appeared. I can no longer represent you. The next lawyer she called told her the same thing, as did the next one, and the 3 that followed. Every family lawyer in the city was either already working for Mercer Industries or was too scared to go up against them. Vivian finally understood. Harrison did not just want to divorce her. He wanted to utterly destroy her dignity. He wanted her to show up in this courtroom with absolutely nothing. She could still hear his voice from their last phone call. That condescending tone he always used when explaining things to people he thought were beneath him. "You should just sign the papers, sweetheart. You are not equipped for this kind of fight, sweetheart." He only ever called her that when he was trying to be mean. The large wooden door behind the judge's bench swung open. The entire room stood up. Judge Patricia Holloway walked in, a woman in her late 50s with her gray hair tied back in a tight bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain on her neck. She was known for being fair, and Vivian held on to that thought like a lifeline. "Please be seated." The sound of expensive clothes rustling and wooden benches creaking filled the air. Bradford Whitmore stood with a dramatic flair. "Your Honor, my name is Bradford Whitmore III, and I am representing the petitioner, Harrison Mercer. We are ready to begin the preliminary custody hearing." Judge Holloway glanced at the empty seat beside Vivian, her face showing no emotion. "Mrs. Mercer, I see you do not have legal representation today." Vivian got to her feet. Her legs were trembling, and she could feel the baby pressing down on her. "Yes, Your Honor. I have not been able to find a lawyer." Bradford made a small noise, not quite a laugh, but just loud enough for everyone to notice. Judge Holloway's gaze shifted to him. "Mr. Whitmore, was there something you wanted to contribute?" "Only that Mrs. Mercer has been given plenty of time to hire a lawyer. This is the third time she has appeared in this court without one. At a certain point, one has to wonder if this is just a strategy to delay the proceedings." Vivian felt her throat tighten. She desperately wanted to explain everything. She wanted to tell the judge about the phone calls, the lawyers who suddenly had conflicts of interest, and the way Harrison's influence seemed to touch every law firm in the city. But she had no evidence, only her story against the word of a billionaire. "Your Honor," Vivian said, her voice surprisingly steady, "I would like to respectfully ask for more time to find legal representation." Bradford just shook his head. "Your Honor, this is her third request for a delay. My client has been exceptionally patient through all of this. He has business responsibilities and charity events to attend to. We simply cannot keep postponing this hearing forever." Harrison nodded, with a serious look on his face, playing the part of the concerned husband and the reasonable man being troubled by his difficult wife. Under the table, Vivian grabbed her phone out of habit, a small, desperate act of hope. She looked at the screen. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock. There were no new messages. Her mother had not gotten back to her in 2 days. Vivian had called Eleanor 5 times and sent 3 emails, but there was no response. Complete silence. Maybe she does not want to be a part of this. Maybe she thinks I brought this on myself. Maybe she is just embarrassed by me. The negative thoughts started to overwhelm her, but she pushed them away. Judge Holloway looked down at the documents on her desk. The silence in the room felt endless. "Mrs. Mercer," she said at last, "I am sympathetic to your circumstances. However, Mr. Whitmore has a valid point about the repeated requests for postponement. I am going to let the hearing proceed today. You have the option to represent yourself, or, if you qualify financially, you can ask for a court-appointed lawyer." Qualify financially? Vivian almost laughed out loud. Officially, she was married to a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But in her current reality, she did not have access to even one of their bank accounts. Harrison had frozen all of her assets on the very same day he filed for the divorce. Bradford Whitmore smiled like a shark that smells blood in the water. "Your Honor, if it pleases the court, I would like to begin with our opening statement." "Proceed." Bradford fastened the button on his suit jacket. He paced slowly to the middle of the courtroom, each step carefully planned. "Your Honor, this is a very straightforward case. We have a highly successful man, a loving father, and a respected member of this community. He married a woman who, at first, seemed lovely and devoted, but as time went on, her real personality began to show. Vivian's nails dug deep into her palm. Vivian Mercer is emotionally unstable, Bradford declared. She is inclined to make paranoid accusations. She has exhibited some very troubling behavior during her pregnancy. My client, out of pure and genuine concern for his unborn child, has been left with no choice but to file for primary custody. Each word felt like a punch to the gut. Emotionally unstable, paranoid, troubling behavior. This is his plan? He is going to paint me as a crazy person. He is going to take my baby away from me because I couldn't get a lawyer to help me fight back. Harrison just watched her, his expression calm and almost disinterested, as if this whole thing was just a small chore he had to take care of in his otherwise busy schedule. Bradford kept talking, throwing out statistics on maternal mental health and making vague comments about certain incidents, offering no specifics, or anything that could be proven. It was all just insinuation dressed up in legal jargon. The courtroom doors let out a long creak as they opened. Vivian's head snapped toward the sound, and her heart leaped with hope. A young court clerk entered, carrying a stack of files. She gave a document to Judge Holloway and then quietly left. It was not her mother. Harrison's eyes met Vivian's, and a small smile played on his lips. "Were you expecting someone, sweetheart?" Vivian ignored him, turning back to face the judge. Her hands were shaking so much she had to press them flat against the table again to steady them. "I am alone." The truth of that thought settled deep into her bones. I am utterly and completely alone. Bradford wrapped up his opening statement with a few meaningless words about protecting the child and the sacred duty of the court. Judge Holloway then turned to Vivian. "Mrs. Mercer, would you like to make an opening statement?" Vivian stood up, the room feeling like it was tilting. She gripped the edge of the table to keep her balance. "Your Honor," her voice broke. She cleared her throat and began again. "Your Honor, I am not unstable. I am not paranoid. I am a pregnant woman whose husband has systematically taken away her ability to defend herself in this court." Bradford let out a dismissive scoff. "Your Honor, I am not finished." The words came out sharper than she intended, surprising even herself. Judge Holloway raised a hand. "Let her finish, Mr. Whitmore." Vivian took a deep breath as the baby kicked inside her. "For 6 years, I was a devoted wife. I left my career behind to support my husband. I made his life run perfectly, and in exchange, Her voice broke again. She could not bring herself to say it. "Not right now. Not in this place. I will represent myself today," Vivian stated. "I have no other option. But I am not the person they are trying to make me out to be." She sat back down, her legs feeling weaker than she expected. Harrison leaned over and whispered something to Bradford, and they both smirked. Judge Holloway wrote something down in her notes. "Very well, we will proceed. Mr. Whitmore, you may call your first witness." Bradford rose to his feet. "The petitioner calls Constance Mercer to the stand." Vivian watched as her mother-in-law stood up, her pearls shining and her posture perfect. She was a woman who had spent 6 years looking for ways to make Vivian feel insignificant. This is only the beginning. The thought should have filled her with dread. But instead, she felt something new starting to grow inside her. A quiet strength, a stubborn will. "I made it through 6 years married to her son. I can make it through this." Vivian rested both hands on her stomach. "We can make it through this." The baby gave another little kick. Constance Mercer took the witness stand as if sitting for a painting, with a perfectly straight back and a lifted chin. Her heels made a soft clicking sound on the wood floor. The court clerk gave the oath, and Constance's voice was crisp and well-rehearsed. "I do solemnly swear." Bradford Whitmore came forward, showing the kind of careful respect a man has for his paycheck. "Mrs. Mercer, I appreciate you coming in. I realize this must be hard." "It is," Constance said, placing a hand over her heart. "But I would do whatever it takes to protect my grandchild. A wave of nausea hit Vivian. Your grandchild. She spoke as if the baby wasn't still a part of Vivian, as if Vivian herself had already vanished. Can you tell us about your daughter-in-law's conduct over the last year? Constance let out a long sigh, the kind that signals a prepared speech of complaints. Where should I even start? Vivian was always a bit emotional, but the pregnancy has made her unstable and suspicious. She started accusing Harrison of horrible things. What sorts of things? She claimed he was hiding assets and having affairs with other women. Constance shook her head with feigned sadness. My son may have his faults, but he is not unfaithful. He created an entire empire from the ground up. He simply has no time for that. Under the table, Vivian's fists tightened. From the ground up, Harrison had been given a $60 million inheritance from his dad. He had grown it, certainly, but it was hardly from nothing. Has Vivian appeared unreasonable to you at any point? Bradford questioned Constance. Leaning in as if sharing a secret, Constance said. She would burst into tears over nothing. She insisted on seeing financial records. She even accused Harrison of hiding money in offshore accounts, which is just ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. I know about the accounts. I have the proof. But all of that proof was on her computer, the same one Harrison took from their home right after he had the locks changed. In your professional judgment, Bradford continued, do you believe Vivian Mercer is capable of being a mother? Objection! Vivian shot to her feet, her voice sounding far more confident than she felt. She is not qualified to give an opinion on that. Judge Holloway agreed with a nod. Sustained. Ask the question differently, Mr. Whitmore. Bradford moved on without skipping a single beat. Constance's face transformed, adopting a well-rehearsed mask of worry. She has purchased absolutely nothing for the baby. No bed, no outfits, not a single thing. When my son offered to furnish the nursery, she turned him down. She told him, Constance paused for dramatic effect, that she was having second thoughts about having a child in this marriage. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. Vivian was in shock. Her jaw dropped. It was a complete and utter lie. She was the one who had brought up getting the nursery ready. Harrison had brushed it off, saying they'd handle it some other time. He was never not busy. That is a lie, Vivian blurted out. Judge Holloway shot her a stern glare. Mrs. Mercer, you will get your chance to question the witness. Vivian sank back into her chair, her cheeks hot with humiliation. Bradford gave Constance a look of deep sympathy. I have no more questions. He went back to his table, where Harrison gave him a supportive pat on the back. Judge Holloway turned to Vivian. The witness is yours. Vivian got to her feet, her thoughts a tangled mess. How could she question a person who was lying so blatantly without any evidence to back her up? As she made her way to the witness stand, Constance eyed her with a look of pure disdain. Mrs. Mercer, Vivian started, her voice shaking slightly before she willed it to be firm. You stated that I haven't purchased anything for my baby. Is that correct? That is what I have seen. And have you visited our house, specifically the room planned for the nursery? Constance moved uncomfortably in her seat. I was a frequent visitor. When was the most recent time you came to our house? A moment of silence. I cannot remember the exact date. Was it before Harrison initiated divorce proceedings, or after? The silence stretched on. It was before. How much time before? Constance's jaw clenched. It was likely a few months. Was it 3 months? 4? Or maybe 6? Objection! Bradford was on his feet. Counsel is harassing the witness. I am trying to establish the foundation of her testimony, Your Honor. Judge Holloway paused to think. I will permit it. Please answer the question, Mrs. Mercer. Constance straightened the fabric of her skirt. It was probably about 4 or 5 months back. So, you have not been inside the nursery in all that time? No. In that case, how can you possibly know what preparations I have or have not made. For just an instant, Constance's carefully constructed composure cracked. Beneath the surface, Vivian could see the flash of anger. "Harrison informed me," Constance said. "My son is not a liar. Your son is a liar about all things. He lies about his finances, his affairs, and how he spends his evenings." But Vivian knew she couldn't say any of that without solid proof. "I have no more questions." She went back to her chair, feeling a tiny spark of triumph. But it was far from enough. Bradford brought up his next witness, and then another, a seemingly endless line of Harrison's staff and business partners. Every single one of them told the same story. Vivian was emotionally volatile. Vivian was hard to deal with. Vivian was an unsuitable mother. By the time the court broke for lunch, Vivian's head was throbbing. She found a spot by herself on a bench in the corridor, not far from the snack machines. Above her, the fluorescent lights hummed. Coffee had been spilled beside the garbage bin, and its bitter scent mingled with the harsh smell of cleaning chemicals. "I'm going to lose my child." The realization washed over her like a tidal wave. He is going to win. He's got the wealth, the legal team, and a lineup of people willing to say anything for the right price. Vivian glanced at her phone one more time. No messages from her mother. "Why aren't you picking up?" Picking up, they had grown distant over the last few years, a fact Vivian knew was mostly her own doing. Harrison had pushed her to pull away from her relatives. He called her mother controlling and her father weak. He claimed they couldn't comprehend the world he lived in, and she had fallen for it. She had allowed him to cut her off from everyone, piece by piece. He had done it so methodically that she didn't even notice until she woke up one morning completely alone. A memory she hadn't asked for suddenly came to mind. It was from 18 months before, when she and her mother, Eleanor, had a fight about Harrison. Eleanor knew something wasn't right. She had pressed Vivian with sharp questions about their finances, his constant late work nights, and why Vivian seemed to shrink a little more with each visit. "You're overthinking it, Mom," Vivian had insisted. "Harrison is a wonderful husband. You just don't see the side of him I do." Eleanor's face held a peculiar mix of sorrow and something else, an expression Vivian could now identify. "Certainty. I hope that's true, honey. I honestly do. But it wasn't true. You saw it all along. And I refuse to hear it." Vivian covered her face with her hands as quiet, pointless tears streamed down. She felt the familiar little stir of the baby inside her. She took a slow breath in and let it out. "I have to continue this fight. I have to try, even if it seems hopeless." Wiping the tears from her cheeks, she squared her shoulders and got to her feet. A female voice called out from behind her. "Mrs. Mercer!" Vivian spun around. It was a young, nervous-looking blonde woman in her 20s. Vivian knew who she was in an instant. Amber Sinclair, Harrison's assistant, his mistress. Vivian's entire body tensed up. "What do you need?" Amber looked nervously from side to side and lowered her voice so it was almost inaudible. "I am not supposed to be here. Harrison would be furious if he knew I was speaking with you." "Then what are you doing here?" Amber nervously wrung her hands. She had chewed her fingernails to the quick. "Because I have information you can use. Proof of the finances, the secret foreign accounts." Vivian felt her heart pause for a beat before it began to pound in her chest. "What reason do you have to help me?" Amber's eyes were swollen and pink. It was clear she had been crying. "Because it turns out I wasn't the only other woman. He was cheating on me with someone else this entire time. It would have been comical if it weren't so sad. So, he was unfaithful to his mistress?" Amber winced at the word. "I understand what I did was wrong. I accept that. But I truly believed—" "You believed he was in love with you?" Amber said nothing. "He isn't capable of loving anyone," Vivian stated. "That's a lesson I learned a long time ago. And now you have too. Amber dug around in her handbag. She produced a small memory stick. It is all on this device, she said. The banking information, the fake corporations, the messages where he discusses concealing money from you, and how he started planning this separation a full year ago. Vivian just looked at the little piece of plastic. So small, yet it held the power to alter her entire future. How do I know I can believe you? You have no reason to, Amber admitted, her voice breaking. But the information is genuine. I swear on my life. Vivian accepted the drive, feeling the warmth from Amber's hand. If you are trying to set me up somehow, it is not a trick, I promise. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from down the hall. Amber's head jerked in that direction. I need to leave. He must not find me with you. She rushed off, vanishing as she rounded the corner. Vivian stared down at the flash drive, resting in her hand. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt a glimmer of hope. But it wasn't sufficient. She was still without an attorney. She had nobody who could correctly introduce this information in court. The bailiff's voice boomed, "Court is back in session in 5 minutes." Vivian slipped the memory stick into her bag. I finally have proof, but what is proof worth if you can't show it to anyone? She headed back to the courtroom. The massive, intimidating wooden doors seemed to loom over her. I am not defeated. Not yet. She shoved them open. The afternoon proceedings started with another expert witness, a psychologist named Dr. Marcus Webb, who had been paid for his testimony. Vivian had never seen him before. Bradford introduced him as if he were a prized possession, with impressive qualifications and decades of unbiased professional experience. Dr. Webb, Bradford began, you have examined documents concerning Mrs. Mercer's history with mental health. Can you tell us your findings? Dr. Webb pushed his glasses up his nose. His tone was calm and professional, the type of voice that could make horrifying statements sound perfectly logical. I have gone over the records from therapy sessions Mrs. Mercer took part in about 3 years back. The material I found was troubling. A chill went through Vivian. Those were the sessions from after her miscarriage, 3 years ago. What sort of troubling material? Bradford prompted. Mrs. Mercer conveyed deep feelings of inadequacy. She spoke of having invasive thoughts. She also showed an inability to connect with the idea of having children in the future. Each word landed with a heavy thud, sending shockwaves through the courtroom. Vivian felt like she couldn't get any air into her lungs. Those conversations were private. They were supposed to be protected. She had sought help after losing her first pregnancy at just 11 weeks. Her grief was a raw, open wound, and Harrison was the one who had pushed her to go to counseling. He had insisted it would help her heal. Now she finally understood his real reason. Your Honor, Vivian shot to her feet, her voice trembling. Those were private therapy sessions for the grief I felt after a miscarriage. He recorded every single one without my consent. Bradford just shook his head. The sessions were recorded as part of the clinic's standard procedure, and we have the patient's signed consent form. I never agreed to that. Your signature is right there on the intake paperwork, Mrs. Mercer. Vivian's mind flashed back to that day. She remembered a thick stack of papers and an impatient receptionist. Sign here, initial there, sign right here. Vivian hadn't read a single word. She had been crying too hard to even focus on the fine print. He had set a trap for me, even back then, even as I was falling apart after losing our child. Dr. Webb Bradford continued, after reviewing these materials, do you have any concerns about Mrs. Mercer's ability to be a primary caregiver? I do, Dr. Webb replied with a serious nod. The lingering grief, the uncertainty she expressed about becoming a mother, and the paranoid thoughts about her husband. These all point to a pattern that suggests she would benefit from professional supervision while raising a young child. Professional supervision. That was their strategy. They wouldn't try to take the baby from her directly. They would just watch her, control her, and make sure Harrison always had the upper hand. Vivian felt her hands tremble as she gripped the table. She thought back to that day 3 years ago, to the blood that just wouldn't stop, to the cold emergency room, and to the look on the doctor's face as he told her the news. She remembered Harrison's expression, a mask of concern that barely hid his deep irritation. The timing just was not right. Anyway, he had said to her, much later, when he believed she was not listening. The timing was not right. He said it as if their baby was just an inconvenience, a simple conflict in his schedule. "I have no more questions," Bradford said as he returned to his seat. Judge Holloway then turned to Vivian. "Would you like to cross-examine the witness?" Vivian stood up. Her legs felt like they were not even attached to her own body. She walked slowly toward the witness stand. "Dr. Webb, have you and I ever met in person?" "No. I have only reviewed the clinical documentation." "And did you speak with anyone who actually knows me? Any friends, family members, or coworkers?" "I did speak with Mr. Mercer and his mother." "So your entire professional assessment of me is based on therapy transcripts from 3 years ago, and on conversations with my husband and his mother? The very people who are actively trying to take my baby away from me?" Dr. Webb shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "The clinical evidence is—" "Do you have any idea what actually happened 3 years ago, Dr. Webb? Do you know why I was even in therapy? You had experienced a pregnancy loss." "A pregnancy loss?" Vivian's voice became hard as steel. "I lost my baby when I was 11 weeks pregnant. One week I saw a beautiful little heartbeat on the ultrasound screen, and the next week it was simply gone. The entire courtroom fell silent. I went to therapy because I was drowning in grief, because my husband told me I needed professional help, and because I could not stop crying for weeks." Vivian's eyes burned with unshed tears. "And now you are using my grief as a weapon to try and take away my second child?" Dr. Webb's expression remained unchanged. "I am merely offering my professional analysis of the situation." "You are not offering analysis. You're offering him ammunition. Ammunition for a man who is using the most painful moment of my life against me." "Objection!" Bradford jumped to his feet. "That is argumentative." "Sustained," Judge Holloway said in a quiet voice. "Mrs. Mercer, you must limit yourself to asking questions." Vivian forced herself to take a deep breath. "I have no further questions." She walked back to her seat. The baby inside her was pushing hard against her ribs, making it difficult to breathe. "Just hold on, little one. Please hold on." Judge Holloway announced a 15-minute recess. Vivian made her way to the women's restroom, went into the very last stall, and locked the door behind her before sitting on the closed toilet seat. The bathroom was completely empty, and the only sounds were the steady drip of a leaky faucet and the low hum of the fluorescent lights above. She thought about the baby she had lost, the one she never even had the chance to name. She remembered that tiny, flickering heartbeat that had disappeared without any warning. She thought about Harrison, about how he had held her so tightly in the hospital, and how he had said all the right things. "We will try again. This is not your fault. I am here for you." But he was already seeing Amber by then. The devastating truth had hit her months later when she discovered the text messages and went back to check the dates. Their baby had died, and Harrison had already begun his affair. She remembered their anniversary dinner that year, just 2 months after she had lost the baby. Harrison had given her a beautiful necklace with 3 diamonds. "For our past, our present, and our future," he had said. He had ordered the exact same necklace for Amber during that very same week. Vivian had found the receipt. The bathroom felt cold. The air conditioning was turned up way too high. Vivian wrapped her arms protectively around her stomach. The baby kicked her, 2, then 3 times. "I am going to protect you," she whispered to her belly. "I am not sure how I am going to do it yet, but I will. I give you my word." She stayed there for 7 more minutes, just listening to the dripping faucet and feeling her daughter move around inside of her. When she finally walked out of the stall, her eyes were completely dry. The hallway outside was almost deserted. A man was sitting on a bench directly across from the bathroom, reading a newspaper. He looked up from his paper. Their eyes met for a moment. Vivian froze in place. It was Wesley Mercer, Harrison's older brother. She had not seen him in many years. He had been cut off from all family gatherings after some kind of major disagreement. Harrison never spoke about it. His mother, Constance, acted as if Wesley did not even exist. Wesley neatly folded his newspaper and stood up. "Vivian." "Wesley," she said, not knowing what else to say. He walked toward her at a slow pace. She could not read the expression on his face. "It looks like you are having a pretty tough day." "You could certainly say that." He nodded, then reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small business card. "I want you to call this number tonight. There is someone who is willing to help you." Vivian stared down at the card. There was no name on it, just a phone number. "Why would you ever want to help me? You are his brother." A muscle in Wesley's jaw twitched. A dark look flashed across his eyes. "Harrison and I have not been brothers for a very long time. Not since he forged our father's will and stole my entire inheritance." His words just hung there in the silent hallway. "He forged the will?" "Just call the number," Wesley said, taking a step back. "Call tonight. Do not put it off." He then walked away, turned a corner, and was gone. Vivian looked down at the business card again. Her hands were trembling. The bailiff's voice suddenly echoed through the hall. "Court will be resuming in 2 minutes." She quickly slipped the card into her purse, right next to the flash drive and her dead cell phone. 2 small pieces of hope, but no way to use either of them, not at that moment. The afternoon seemed to last forever, with more witnesses and more carefully planned lies. Vivian sat through every minute of it. Her back was aching, and her feet were beginning to swell. The baby had shifted into a very uncomfortable position that was pressing down hard on her bladder. But she did not leave her seat, and she did not ask for any breaks. She just sat there, listening and taking notes on a yellow legal pad she had found in the courtroom. She wrote down details, names, and contradictions, anything at all that she might be able to use later, if she ever got the chance. At 4:30, Judge Holloway announced the end of the day's proceedings. "We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9. Mrs. Mercer, I strongly suggest that you find yourself some legal representation." "Yes, Your Honor." Harrison walked past her on his way out of the courtroom, so close that she could smell his cologne, that familiar scent of cedar and citrus that she used to love. "You did a little better than I thought you would," he whispered, "but you are still going to lose." Vivian did not say a word. She just quietly gathered her belongings, her purse, her legal pad, and what was left of her dignity. The parking garage felt cold, and her footsteps echoed on the hard concrete. Her car was a 3-year-old sedan. Harrison had wanted her to drive something much nicer, like a Mercedes or a BMW, something that would reflect his social status. Vivian had insisted on keeping the sedan, which was one of the very few arguments she had ever won. She sat in the driver's seat, with the door closed and the engine off, just staring into space. 45 minutes went by. She could not bring herself to go home. Home was now just a room at a courtyard inn next to the highway. Harrison had changed the locks on their house the same day he filed for divorce. She just could not face going back to that hotel. She could not stand the beige walls, the scratchy bedspread, or the Bible that was always in the nightstand drawer. So she just sat there in the parking garage, with the engine off, watching the light fade as the sun began to set. Her phone suddenly buzzed. Vivian grabbed it with shaking hands. It was a text message from Marlene, her best friend, the only person who had not abandoned her through all of this. How did everything go? Call me as soon as you can. Vivian immediately dialed her number. Marlene picked up on the very first ring. Tell me every single thing that happened. Vivian told her everything about the witnesses, the horrible psychological report, the way Harrison had laughed, and the empty chair next to her at the table. That man is an absolute monster, Marlene said. I always knew he was a bad person. I just never knew he was this evil. You tried to warn me. I should have tried to warn you harder. Vivian rested her forehead against the steering wheel. I got something today, some evidence from Amber. From the mistress. She gave me a flash drive. It has bank account information on it. Offshore money, but I have no idea how to use it. I do not have a lawyer. There was silence on the other end of the line. And there is something else. Wesley Mercer gave me a phone number. He said it was for someone who wants to help me. Harrison's brother? I thought those two hated each other. They do. That is why he is helping me. There was more silence. You need to call that number, Marlene said. Call it tonight. What do you possibly have to lose at this point? She was right. Vivian had absolutely nothing left to lose. Okay, I will call the number. And Vivian, your mom called me today. Vivian sat up straight in her seat. My mom? She called you? She said that she has been trying to get in touch with you. Your phone just keeps going straight to voicemail. That is impossible. I have had my phone with me the entire time. Vivian quickly checked her phone settings. Her stomach felt like it dropped to the floor. Blocked numbers. There was a list of them that she had not created. Her mother Eleanor's number was right at the top of the list. Harrison. He must have done it when he borrowed her laptop while she was in the shower, back when she still trusted him. He blocked her number, Vivian whispered. Harrison blocked my own mother's phone number. Jesus. Vivian's hands were shaking as she removed the block. A second later, a flood of new messages poured in, voicemails and texts. Dozens and dozens of them. Sweetheart, please call me. Vivian, I am so worried about you. I am on my way. Just hold on. I am coming. The very last text message was from that morning. That is not what your mother said at all, Marlene corrected her. She told me she is on her way. You just need to hang on. Vivian broke down, overwhelmed by deep, ragged sobs that racked her entire frame. She is coming. She is really on her way. That is exactly what she said. The parking garage had grown dim. The pale, orange glow of the overhead lights hummed to life. I really believed she had abandoned me. I was sure she no longer cared. She cares, Vivian. She has never stopped caring. You have to know that. Vivian dabbed at her tears and tried to steady her breathing. I have to dial that number, the one Wesley gave me. Go ahead. I am not going anywhere. Vivian located the card and punched in the number with unsteady fingers. The phone rang twice before a woman's calm, professional voice answered. Am I speaking with Vivian? Yes. May I ask, who is calling? My name is not important at the moment. What is important is that we have information you need concerning Harrison's finances, his true assets, and the prenuptial agreement you were forced to sign. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. How could you possibly know about that? We have been monitoring Harrison Mercer for a very long time, just waiting for the perfect chance to act. You are that chance. I do not understand. Who do you mean by we? There was a brief silence. Your mother will explain everything when she gets here. We have been cooperating. My own mother? Just have faith in us, Vivian. Be in court tomorrow. Do not back down. Regardless of what takes place during the morning session, you must not concede. Then the line went dead. Vivian just stared at her phone. Marlene was still on the other line. What was that all about? They told me my mother will explain everything. They said she has been arranging something. So your mom has a strategy? A strategy. Eleanor Ashford always had a strategy. Vivian had let herself forget that. Harrison had made her forget. "I should get going," Vivian said. "I really need to try and reach my mom. Call me later, just so I know you are all right." "I will." Vivian ended the call and immediately dialed her mother's number. It went to voicemail. She tried a second time. Voicemail again. She made one last attempt. "Vivian?" It was Eleanor's voice, rushed but unmistakable. "Mom, I am at the airport. My plane lands at midnight. I will be at the courthouse tomorrow morning. Mom, what is going on? Who were those people? I cannot get into it over the phone. I just need you to trust me. Can you do that for me?" Vivian's mind flashed through all the years she had doubted her mother. Every time she had believed Harrison's distorted narrative over Eleanor's warnings. "Yes, I trust you. Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is a whole new day." The call ended. Vivian remained in her car for another 20 minutes, watching the orange lights flicker and feeling the gentle stir of her daughter inside her. A fundamental change had occurred. She could not yet put it into words, but for the first time in months, the heavy feeling of being all alone had started to lift. She turned the ignition and guided the car out of the parking garage. Tomorrow is a whole new day. She had to hold on to that promise. At 9 o'clock, the courtroom was even more packed than it had been the day before. The story had gotten out. The drama of Harrison Mercer versus his pregnant wife was apparently excellent entertainment. Vivian took her usual seat, the chair next to her glaringly empty. Her mother had not yet shown up. The airport, midnight. That is what Eleanor promised. But the sun was up, and Vivian was still by herself. Maybe there was a problem. A flight delay, perhaps. She could only hope. Bradford Whitmore got to his feet, a wider smirk on his face today. "Your Honor, we wish to present additional evidence this morning, specifically financial records that prove Mrs. Mercer's complete financial dependence on my client." Judge Holloway gave a slight nod. "Proceed." A set of documents flashed onto a projection screen, showing bank records and credit card statements that told a story in numbers. As you can clearly see, Mrs. Mercer has no personal income, no savings in her own name, and no property. Everything she possesses is owned by my client. Vivian's jaw clenched. "Everything I have is his because he demanded it, because he needed total control." She could still hear the conversation from their second year of marriage. Harrison had sounded so calm and persuasive. "Why on earth would you need your own account? Sweetheart, we are a team. Everything of mine is also yours." So she had given it all up, closing her private bank account, cashing out her retirement fund, and even handing over the emergency cash her father had given her as a wedding present. Every single dollar had been moved into accounts that only had Harrison's name on them. "My client has been incredibly generous," Bradford went on. "He proposed a settlement of $200,000 to Mrs. Mercer. Considering her contribution to the marriage was effectively nothing, this offer is beyond fair. $200,000. Harrison was worth $450 million. She knew that for a fact now. The flash drive had proven it. 200,000 was an insult. It was a joke. Additionally, Bradford said, we can show that Mrs. Mercer made zero contributions to Mercer Industries. She played no part in my client's business achievement. She attended social events. She decorated their home. That was the full extent of her contribution. Vivian thought of all the parties, the hundreds of them, the networking functions, the charity balls, the dinners she had meticulously planned and hosted with a smile. Even on nights she was completely exhausted. She thought of the business partners she had charmed, the agreements that were closed over food she had cooked herself, the clients who had become friends because she made them feel welcome. None of that was considered valuable because it could not be assigned a dollar amount. Bradford finished his presentation and returned to his table. Judge Holloway turned to Vivian. Mrs. Mercer, Do you have a rebuttal? Vivian stood up, her legs shaking. She had not slept at all. The baby had been restless the entire night. Your Honor, I have evidence that directly contradicts everything Mr. Whitmore has just claimed. Bradford scoffed. What evidence could you possibly have? Financial records that reveal my husband's actual net worth, offshore accounts he has kept hidden from this court, and a prenuptial agreement I was manipulated into signing. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. Harrison's expression flickered, the first small crack in his perfect composure. Your Honor, Bradford said quickly, these are obvious fabrications. Let her speak, Mr. Whitmore. Vivian's hands trembled as she retrieved the flash drive from her purse. This contains bank statements, emails, and documentation of various shell companies. My husband is worth over $400 million, not the $70 million he reported to this court. Harrison jumped to his feet. That is stolen property. She took confidential company files. I did not steal anything. They were provided to me. By whom? The large doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Every person turned, and Vivian's heart stopped. Eleanor Ashford was standing in the doorway, her silver hair styled back, wearing a navy blue suit and carrying the same commanding presence that had defined courtrooms for 30 years. But Eleanor was not by herself. Behind her stood Wesley Mercer, and behind Wesley was Amber Sinclair. The gallery erupted into hushed whispers. Judge Holloway rose slightly in her seat, an unconscious gesture of respect. Justice Ashford. Retired, Your Honor. Eleanor's voice projected clearly across the room, but I am still licensed to practice law in this state. She strode confidently down the center aisle. Every person's gaze followed her. The color drained from Bradford Whitmore's face, leaving it the shade of old parchment. Your Honor, Eleanor said, I must apologize for my tardiness. My flight out of Washington was delayed. I am Eleanor Ashford, and I will be serving as my daughter's counsel. Harrison clutched Bradford's arm, his sharp whisper carrying to those nearby. That is her mother. Her mother is Eleanor Ashford. The name carried significant weight, even for Harrison. She was the woman who had authored the definitive ruling on the concealment of marital assets, the judge whose legal opinions had molded family law for a generation, and the lawyer who, before her judicial career, had secured the largest divorce award in the history of the state. Your Honor, Bradford was on his feet. This is extremely irregular. We have received no notification of new legal representation. I believe my daughter filed for 3 continuances in order to obtain legal counsel. Eleanor reached the front of the court, placing a reassuring hand on Vivian's shoulder. Vivian felt the warmth seep through her blouse. You objected to every single request. You were the one who wanted to move forward at once. You should consider your wish granted. She opened her briefcase and took out a thick file. I have had 2 weeks to get ready, Mr. Whitmore. That was ample time. Judge Holloway leaned back in her chair, an expression of what looked like relief crossing her face. This court is pleased to see Mrs. Mercer is now properly represented. Justice Ashford, you may proceed. Eleanor turned to address the room. Her gaze passed over Harrison, then Bradford, and finally Constance in the audience. Your Honor, before we get started, I would like to call 2 witnesses who have come forward with information directly related to this case. She gestured to Wesley and Amber. Wesley Mercer, the petitioner's brother, and Amber Sinclair, the petitioner's former executive assistant. Former. The word stood out to Vivian. Former. Harrison's face was a rigid mask of fury he was struggling to contain. This is a setup, he snarled. My brother is a disgruntled failure. Mr. Mercer, Judge Holloway's voice was like ice. You will get your chance to speak. Sit down. Harrison sat down. Eleanor offered a smile. It was not a kind one. Now then, she announced, let us discuss exactly what my son-in-law has been hiding." Eleanor moved about the courtroom as if she owned it, which, in many ways, she did. She had argued cases right here before her appointment to the Supreme Court. The very wood paneling seemed to remember her voice. "Your Honor, I would like to present Exhibit A." Bradford stood up. "Objection. We have not had a chance to review this. These are public financial documents," Eleanor said, with calm assurance. "They are easily verified, and they happen to completely contradict the financial disclosure submitted by the petitioner." Judge Holloway nodded. "I will allow it." The document appeared on the screen. Vivian had seen it on the flash drive, but seeing it projected for the entire courtroom to view felt far more substantial and powerful. "This is Mr. Mercer's actual net worth," Eleanor declared, "as recorded in confidential investor reports for his company. $452 million. Model." A collective gasp went through the gallery. Now, let us look at Exhibit B. A second document materialized on the screen, this one being the financial disclosure filed with this very court, which stated a net worth of $70 million. The two figures were displayed next to each other, their simple contrast a powerful indictment. "That is a difference of $382 million, Eleanor pressed on, "which, Your Honor, is nothing less than fraud committed against this court." Bradford was starting to perspire. Vivian could see the gloss of sweat on his forehead. "Your Honor, these papers—" "What is the source of these papers?" "They came from Mr. Mercer's private files." Eleanor's tone was frigid, "and were turned over by a concerned individual. This is obviously the act of a bitter employee." "Not quite," Eleanor corrected. "It is the act of a concerned brother." At that moment, Wesley Mercer came forward. "I am willing to testify," he declared, under oath, "about every last detail." Harrison shot up from his chair. "You snake! You absolute—" "Mr. Mercer," Judge Holloway's gavel slammed down on the wood, "take your seat this instant, or I will have you escorted out." Harrison collapsed back into his seat. His hands were trembling. Vivian had never witnessed him lose his composure like this. It was a bizarre experience, watching his carefully constructed mask fall apart. The man she once loved, the man she had come to fear, was now just a man sputtering with rage in a courtroom. The baby gave a sharp kick. Vivian laid a hand over her stomach. "I know, I see it too. This is the consequence when secrets are brought into the light." Eleanor proceeded, presenting one document after another. There were the offshore accounts located in the Cayman Islands, 3 in total, holding $90 million. Then came the shell corporations in Delaware that were used to conceal real estate holdings, the property in Switzerland, the yacht that was registered under a Panamanian holding company, and the art collection that was technically owned by a trust Harrison conveniently forgot to mention. And after that came the emails. Eleanor's voice was steady as she read each one for the court. August 15th. From Mr. Mercer to his financial advisor. And I want you to be certain that Vivian's name is left off all the new accounts. I need this kept entirely separate. October 3rd. From Mr. Mercer to his lawyer, begin drafting the divorce papers. Do not file them yet. I prefer to wait until she is deeper into the pregnancy, which will make it more difficult for her to resist. An absolute silence fell over the courtroom. More difficult for her to resist, Eleanor echoed. That was his strategy, to schedule the divorce for a time when his pregnant wife would be at her most defenseless. Vivian could feel the tears rolling down her cheeks. She made no effort to wipe them away. He had been planning this the whole time. The pregnancy was no mistake. Harrison had stopped using contraception 6 months prior. She had believed he wanted a family. She had believed he was prepared. In reality, he just wanted her cornered. Your Honor, Eleanor stated, I am filing a motion to have the prenuptial agreement declared null and void on the grounds of fraudulent inducement and insufficient disclosure. My daughter was never made aware of Mr. Mercer's actual net worth. She was given doctored financial records to review. She signed that document under duress only 3 days before their wedding, having been informed the wedding would be called off if she did not comply. Bradford got to his feet unsteadily. Your Honor, the prenuptial agreement was signed and executed legally. It was also witnessed by 3 of Mr. Mercer's own staff members. Eleanor interrupted him, all 3 of whom happened to receive very large bonuses that same week. I have the payroll statements right here. She passed another file over to the judge. This agreement is the very picture of unconscionability, and I happen to have written the book on the subject. In spite of the tension, a person in the gallery chuckled. Judge Holloway examined the papers, her expression impossible to decipher. Justice Ashford. Mrs. is perfectly fine, Your Honor. Mrs. Ashford, this is a very significant amount of evidence. I am going to call a recess so I can review all of these materials. Of course, Your Honor. The court will be back in session at 2 o'clock. The gavel struck again. The courtroom burst into a cacophony of sound. Reporters, she wondered when the reporters had shown up, were swarming toward the front. The flashes of camera phones went off everywhere. Harrison pushed right past his legal team and seized his mother's arm. They rushed out through a side door. Vivian remained seated, paralyzed and unable to process anything. Her mother came and sat in the chair next to her. The seat was no longer vacant. Mom, the word was barely a whisper. I am right here, my dear. I am with you now. I did not think you were going to make it. I thought, I am aware, and I am sorry. Eleanor reached for her hand. I needed to be extremely cautious. If Harrison had known I was helping you before I had gathered everything, he would have figured out a way to shut me out as well. The phone, he had your number blocked. I had a feeling that was the case. It is the reason I got in touch with Marlene. You organized all of this. Eleanor gave a small smile, her eyes glistening with tears. You are my little girl. Did you really believe I would stand by and let him ruin you? Vivian rested her head on her mother's shoulder. Just for a second, she felt like she was 8 years old again, completely safe and protected. There is something else, Eleanor added in a low voice. Wesley has been compiling evidence of Harrison's crimes for years, including fraud, tax evasion, and even forging their father's will. Harrison should have been sent to prison a long time ago. Then why did Wesley wait so long to speak up? He was terrified. Harrison possesses resources, connections, and the power to make any problem simply vanish. Eleanor paused for a moment, but as soon as Wesley learned about the divorce, he reached out to me. He told me he could not bear to see Harrison do the same thing to you that Harrison had done to him. What exactly did Harrison do to him? He poisoned his relationship with their father, faked the will to cheat Wesley out of his entire inheritance, and hired private detectives to find any dirt on him, threatening to expose it if Wesley ever dared to contest the forgery. Vivian let this information sink in. The man she had called her husband, the father of her unborn child, was a common criminal, a liar, a monster disguised by expensive suits and a charming personality. It is almost finished, Eleanor assured her. Just a couple more hours. Do you think you can manage? Vivian glanced down at her stomach, at the child who had endured all of this right alongside her. Yes, we can manage. The 2-hour break felt more like 20 minutes. Vivian was sitting with her mother and father. Douglas had shown up during the recess, his face a mixture of worry and relief, in a little conference room beside the main courtroom. Nobody said much. There was not a lot left to say. Eleanor looked over her notes. Douglas simply held Vivian's hand. The baby moved and then kicked. "Have you been eating properly?" Douglas asked her. "Doctor questions, father questions." "I am trying to. You need to get enough protein and iron. I will get you something to eat as soon as this is all done." As soon as this is all done, as if it were nearly complete, as if the most difficult part was not still lying ahead. At 1:30, Vivian excused herself. She needed to breathe, to have some space, just a quiet moment, to be with her own thoughts. The courthouse restroom was deserted. It had the same flickering fluorescent lights, the same leaky faucet. She stood before the sink, looking at her own reflection. The woman staring back from the mirror was a stranger. Her face was pale with deep, dark circles under her eyes, and her unwashed hair clung lifelessly to her head, even with a baby on the way. The clothes she wore seemed to swallow her small frame. "He did this to me," the thought landed with a cold, hard finality. "No, I let this happen." Her fingers dug into the porcelain sink as a wave of guilt crashed over her. She was the one who had chosen Harrison. She was the one who had defended him against everyone who saw the truth. She had pushed away her family, abandoned her friends, and given up her career, all because he had twisted her reality until she believed it was what she wanted. A single sob broke free, followed by a storm of tears, as months of suppressed heartbreak finally erupted. She wept for the marriage she believed she had, for the love she was so sure was real, and for all the years of her life she could never reclaim. She wept for her first child, the one she never had the chance to name, the one Harrison had betrayed, even before its small heart had ceased to beat. She wept for the woman she was before, the architect who created magnificent buildings, the daughter who had a family that cherished her, the person she had lost somewhere in the process. The baby kicked, a sharp and insistent motion. Vivian let out a gasp and placed a hand on her belly. "I know," she whispered to it. "I know, I am so sorry." She looked into the mirror at her own face once more, and beneath all the fatigue, beneath all the hurt, another quality was there. Something tougher, more resilient. "I made it through 6 years with him. I am 8 months pregnant, standing in a courthouse restroom, and I am still here. I am not broken. He did his best to break me, and he failed." She dried her tears and squared her shoulders. The woman staring back at her did the same. "I am not the person he said I was. I am not unstable. I am not without value. I am not crazy. I am the woman who collected proof in secret, who saved the very papers he thought he had shredded, who kept going when every fiber of my being wanted to give up. I am far stronger than he ever imagined." The baby stirred again, this time more gently. "We are going to be all right," Vivian said. "I give you my word." She splashed water on her face, dried her hands, and walked out of the bathroom. Her father was standing in the corridor. "The judge is back," he told her. Vivian gave him a nod. She re-entered the courtroom. The afternoon proceedings were just about to start. The gallery was now even more packed than before. News had clearly gotten out. Harrison was at his table, with Bradford and 2 other lawyers on either side of him. Constance was no longer in the gallery. Wesley and Amber were now seated right behind Vivian. Eleanor was already on her feet. "Your Honor, the respondent would like to call Amber Sinclair to the stand." Harrison's head shot up. "Objection!" Bradford's voice was thin. "Miss Sinclair does not appear on any witness list. Miss Sinclair has decided to come forward on her own with new information that is directly relevant to these proceedings, especially in light of the discovery of extensive fraud. I am confident that the court has the discretion to permit testimony that could shed light on the petitioner's true character." Judge Holloway thought for a second. "I will permit it. Miss Sinclair, you may approach the stand." Amber made her way to the front, the sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She seemed different today, smaller in some way, not as perfectly put together. She took a seat in the witness box, put her right hand up, and swore an oath to tell the truth. Eleanor went to her. Miss Sinclair, for how long were you an employee of Harrison Mercer? For 4 years. And in that period, what kind of relationship did you have? Amber looked over at Harrison. He was glaring at her with absolute loathing. For the first year, it was completely professional. Then, she took a shaky breath. Our relationship turned romantic. For how much time? The gallery whispered, for 3 years. Eleanor confirmed, 3 years. So your affair with Mr. Mercer started before his wife was pregnant the first time? Yes. Eleanor allowed that fact to settle in the room. When did you learn that Mrs. Mercer was pregnant for the first time? He let me know about a week after they knew. Amber hesitated. He was bothered. He complained that the timing was not good. Not good. The words struck Vivian like a punch. Her child, their precious baby, was not good. And what about when Mrs. Mercer miscarried? He almost seemed glad. Amber's voice was just a whisper. He said the problem took care of itself. The courtroom was completely still. Miss Sinclair, did you know about Mr. Mercer's intention to divorce his wife? Yes, he began discussing it around a year ago. He mentioned he wanted to delay until she was much further along in her next pregnancy. He figured it would be simpler to secure custody that way. Did he give you a reason why? He claimed that pregnant women were overly emotional and not logical, and that a judge would easily see she was not a suitable mother. Vivian felt her mother's hand grip her arm, giving her support. Just one last question, Miss Sinclair. Did Mr. Mercer ever say anything specific to you about his wife? Amber shut her eyes. When she looked up again, they were filled with tears. He constantly called her an idiot. He bragged about how easy she was to control. He said she accepted every single word he told her, because she so desperately wanted to. She then looked directly at Vivian. He would laugh about it, about how completely you trusted him. He said you would never figure it out, because you loved him far too much to ever see who he really was. Vivian's eyesight became blurry. She blinked away the tears. He was correct, she whispered. I never saw it. I refused to see it. Vivian, her mother said in a soft voice. Not right now. I have no more questions, Eleanor announced. Bradford got up to cross-examine, but he had nothing to work with. Amber had no incentive to lie. She had already lost everything just by speaking up. Miss Sinclair, Bradford asked, is there a chance you are saying these things out of revenge because you learned Mr. Mercer was with another woman? Amber stared right at him. Yes, she replied. I feel angry. I feel completely humiliated. He treated me the same way he treated his wife, but that fact does not make my words any less true. Bradford took his seat. The afternoon seemed to drag on. Eleanor then called Wesley Mercer to the stand. His story was absolutely crushing, supported by documents that proved Harrison had forged their father's will, along with proof of tax evasion that went back a decade, and evidence showing Harrison had ruined anyone who tried to reveal his secrets. Our father put his faith in Harrison, Wesley stated. He thought he was putting the family company into good hands. Harrison showed his gratitude by taking everything and pushing me out of the picture completely. Why did you wait so long to say something? Eleanor questioned. I was afraid. Wesley's voice was empty of emotion. Harrison has a lot of money and powerful friends. He warned me that if I ever stood up to him, he would ruin what little was left of my good name. I have a family. I could not take that chance. What made you change your mind? Wesley glanced over at Vivian. When I learned what he was putting her through, I knew I had to speak up. I could not just stand by and watch him do the same thing to her that he had done to me. I could not live with myself. Eleanor gave a slight nod. I have no more questions. The judge announced another break, this one for only 30 minutes. Vivian sat inside the conference room. Her mother was going over her notes. Wesley and Amber were gone. Only Douglas remained. Dad? Yes, my dear. Would you be willing to testify for me as a character witness? Douglas raised his head. His eyes looked gentle and full of sorrow. Of course, I will do it if you think it will make a difference. Mom has all the proof she needs, the evidence and the papers, but I need the judge to know who I really am, not the monster Harrison made me out to be. Douglas nodded his head slowly. In that case, I will testify. The court came back into session that afternoon. Eleanor called Douglas Ashford to the stand. He approached slowly, a 60-year-old retired surgeon with hands that had saved so many lives, hands that were now shaking as he swore his oath on the Bible. Dr. Ashford, Eleanor began, could you please tell the court about your daughter? Douglas looked at Vivian, his expression faltering for a second before he regained his composure. My daughter is the most compassionate person I have ever known. She always looks for the good in others, sometimes to a fault. She gives far more than she ever takes. She loves with every part of her being. He took a breath. When she was 22 years old, she was the top student in her architecture program. She created the plans for a community center in a poor neighborhood. She did not ask for a single dollar for her work. She did it simply because she wanted to help people. What happened to her professional life? She met Harrison. He persuaded her that her job was not meaningful and that her real purpose was to be his support. She abandoned everything she had worked for just because he wanted her to. Douglas's tone became sharp. Over 6 years, I watched my daughter fade away. The sparkle in her eyes disappeared. She stopped calling home. She stopped coming by. Harrison told me she was focused on their marriage, but I knew what was really happening. He was isolating her and separating her from everyone that cared about her. Did you ever say anything to him? I did once. It was 5 years ago. I pulled him aside to ask him what he was doing to my little girl, and what was his response? Douglas's jaw became tense. He said, with all due respect, Dr. Ashford, your daughter made her choice. Perhaps it is time for you to realize that she does not need you in her life anymore. His words filled the room with a heavy silence. He was mistaken, Douglas went on. She always needed our support. She just was not able to see it. He made certain of that. Eleanor let the quiet linger. Just one final question, Dr. Ashford. Based on your experience as both a professional and a father, do you believe your daughter is capable of raising a child? Douglas looked straight at Judge Holloway. Your Honor, I have brought hundreds of babies into this world during my career. I have met every type of parent imaginable, the good, the bad, and the ones who were completely overwhelmed. My daughter is going to be a phenomenal mother. It is not because she is without flaws, but because she is resilient, because she endured situations that would have destroyed most people, and because she loves her baby more than she loves herself. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. He then turned his gaze to Harrison. A decent man does not vow to keep someone safe only to become the very danger she needs to be protected from. The courtroom was silent. No more questions, Eleanor stated. Judge Holloway then asked for the closing arguments. Bradford Whitmore stood up. He seemed exhausted and beaten, but he still made an attempt. Your Honor, my client is a successful man of business who has made some errors, but he cares for his child. He wants to be involved in that child's life. Regardless of his personal shortcomings, he should have the opportunity to be a father. His argument was flimsy. Everyone in the room knew it was flimsy. Eleanor then rose to her feet. Your Honor, during the last 2 days, we have been presented with a mountain of evidence showing fraud, manipulation, and consistent abuse. Mr. Mercer did not just mislead this court. He misled his wife, his own brother, his business associates, and every single person who ever put their trust in him. She walked toward the middle of the courtroom. He orchestrated this divorce a full year ago, scheduling it for a time when his pregnant wife would be at her weakest. He prevented every qualified lawyer in this city from taking her case. He used her private therapy sessions against her, and through it all, he joked about how simple she was to control. Eleanor's voice grew louder. My daughter is not unstable. She is not an unfit mother. She is a woman who made it through 6 years of emotional torment while never losing her grace or her compassion. She collected evidence without anyone knowing. She defended herself when there was no one else to do it. She came into this courtroom by herself, 8 months pregnant, to stand against a whole team of lawyers because she would not abandon herself or her baby. She turned to look Harrison straight in the eye. That is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of incredible strength. Then she addressed the judge. Your Honor, I request that you invalidate the prenuptial agreement on the grounds of fraud and manipulation. I request a fair division of the marital property, the actual property, not the fake numbers he provided. I request sole custody of the child, and I ask that you forward Mr. Mercer's financial crimes to the district attorney so they can open a criminal case. She then took her seat. Judge Holloway took off her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. In my 23 years as a judge, she said with a heavy voice, I have seldom witnessed such a shocking disregard for the justice system. She glared at Harrison. Mr. Mercer, you presented fake financial documents to this court. You interfered with your wife's attempts to find a lawyer. You used her private medical information as a weapon against her. You engineered this divorce with calculated cruelty. Harrison opened his mouth to object. His lawyer's hand on his arm silenced him. The prenuptial agreement is now void because of the lack of honest disclosure and the presence of coercion. Miss Mercer is granted a fair share of the marital property based on its true worth. She looked down at her notes. Based on the proof shown here, I estimate Mr. Mercer's total wealth to be around $450 million. Mrs. Mercer will receive 50%. That amount is $225 million. The courtroom audience gasped. Furthermore, Judge Holloway said, her voice rising above the noise, complete custody of the unborn child is granted to the mother. Mr. Mercer can file a request for supervised visits after the baby is born, but only after he undergoes and completes a full psychological assessment. Harrison's face had lost all its color. Lastly, Judge Holloway declared, I am sending the matter of the fraudulent financial documents and all related proof to the district attorney's office to look into possible charges of perjury and fraud. She gave Harrison one final, dismissive look. You believed your money could help you escape the consequences of your actions, Mr. Mercer. You were incorrect. The gavel came down with a loud crack. The room instantly filled with noise. Journalists were yelling out questions, and the flashes from camera phones were everywhere. Harrison's legal team formed a circle around him, attempting to protect him from the pandemonium. Vivian just sat there, completely still. It was over. The words felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Her mother's arms folded around her in a tight embrace. You did it, my sweet girl. You won. That is when the tears started to flow, a messy mix of relief, sheer exhaustion, and something that felt a little like joy. Her father came in for the hug, the three of them holding on to each other in the middle of all the noise. I have to get out of this place, Vivian managed to whisper. Eleanor gave a firm nod. We will use the side exit. Douglas, please go get the car. They moved like shadows down a back hallway, leaving the swarming reporters behind. The chaos began to fade. When they stepped outside, The afternoon sun was almost painful to look at. Vivian realized she had not seen daylight in what seemed like forever. A car pulled up to the curb, with Douglas at the wheel. Vivian slid into the back seat with Eleanor right next to her. As the car pulled away from the courthouse, Vivian glanced out the window. Harrison was standing on the front steps, drowning in a sea of cameras. His suit was perfect, his shoes were polished, and his entire empire was collapsing all around him. He looked smaller than she remembered. Vivian turned her head away. She hoped to never lay eyes on him again. 2 weeks after that day, Vivian was standing in the nursery of her house. It was her house now. The judge had given it to her as part of the settlement. The walls were a soft sage green. She had painted them herself with Marlene's help, applying 3 separate coats. Her arms were sore for days afterward, but it was worth it. In the corner stood the crib, a handmade gift from her father, built from oak and maple, sanded perfectly smooth, and stained a beautiful golden color. 4 generations of Ashford women have slept in a crib that I built, Douglas had told her when he brought it over. This baby is going to be the 5th. The rocking chair was positioned by the window. It had been her grandmother's chair, the very one that rocked Eleanor as a baby, and later the one that rocked Vivian. The wood was worn down to a soft finish from decades of gentle use. Vivian ran her fingers along the armrest. This single piece of furniture held so much history, so much love. The doorbell chimed. A moment later, Marlene was at the nursery doorway. "That is the delivery with the baby supplies. I will take care of it. Thank you so much." Vivian could hear voices from downstairs, the sound of boxes being opened, all the little noises of a normal life returning. She lowered herself into the rocking chair. The leather cushion was brand new, but the wooden frame was the original. The baby had dropped lower. Her doctor said it would be soon, possibly even this week. "We are almost there," Vivian whispered to her belly, "just a little while longer." She thought back on the last 2 weeks, a blur of lawyers, endless paperwork, and interviews with the prosecutors. Harrison was now under a federal investigation, with serious charges on the way. The evidence Wesley provided had opened a floodgate. On some days, it all felt like too much to handle, with the constant phone calls, the reporters, and the never-ending questions. But on other days, it felt like freedom. Today was a freedom day. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Tired, hopeful, and scared," Vivian answered. "That sounds just about right for someone who is about to become a mother." Eleanor walked across the room and stood behind the rocking chair. She placed her hands gently on Vivian's shoulders. "I am so proud of you," she said in a soft voice. "I know that I do not say it nearly enough, but I truly am. You came to me when I needed you most. I should have come to you much sooner. I should have pushed you harder when I first saw the warning signs. I would not have listened back then. Maybe you would not have, but I still should have tried." They stayed that way for a quiet moment, a mother and her daughter, with the afternoon sunlight pouring through the window. "I have a little something for you," Eleanor said. She took a small velvet box from her pocket and placed it into Vivian's hands. Inside was a necklace with a simple gold chain and a tiny pendant, the letter G written in a delicate script. "G is for Grace," Eleanor explained with a smile. "It was your grandmother's name, and I hope it will be your daughter's name too. Grace." Vivian had spent months thinking about names, going over dozens of them. None of them ever felt quite right, but this one did. "Grace," she said out loud. "Grace Ashford, not Mercer. It would never be Mercer." Eleanor nodded, looking pleased. The baby kicked again, a much stronger movement this time. "I think she likes it," Vivian said with a small laugh. 1 month later, the hospital room was quiet as the early morning light peeked through the blinds. Vivian was holding her daughter for the very first time. 7 pounds and 4 ounces, 10 little fingers and 10 little toes. She had a soft sprinkle of dark hair, and her eyes could not quite focus yet, but they seemed to take in everything. Grace. Vivian whispered, "Your name is Grace." The baby let out a tiny sound. It was not really a cry, more like she was acknowledging her name. Eleanor was standing by the window. Douglas was wiping his eyes. Marlene had stepped out into the hall to call her husband. "I need to tell someone who is not currently crying," she had said on her way out. Vivian examined her daughter's face, searching for any trace of Harrison. She found none, or perhaps she just decided not to see them. "This child is mine. Whatever parts of him she might have, she belongs to me. I am going to make a lot of mistakes," Vivian said softly, both to the baby and to herself. "I am going to get things wrong sometimes. I do not know everything there is to know about being a mother." Grace blinked slowly, her tiny hand wrapped tightly around Vivian's finger. "But I do know that I love you, and I know that I will always try. Every single day, I will try to be the mother that you deserve." The baby made another little sound, a sign of contentment. Vivian smiled through the tears that were now running down her face. These were happy tears for a change. "Welcome to the world, Grace. It is not a perfect place, but it is ours." 6 months after that day, Vivian stood in front of a building that she had designed. It was a shelter for women who were leaving abusive relationships, paid for with her settlement money and built by contractors that she had selected herself. The building was filled with light, with windows everywhere, open and airy spaces, and gardens that you could see from every single room. "Women who have lived in darkness deserve to see the sun," she had told the architect, who helped her finalize the designs. "Every room should feel like freedom." The dedication ceremony was small. There were no reporters and no cameras, just the women who would be living there and the staff who would be helping them. The donors who helped make it possible were there, and so was Grace, strapped to Vivian's chest in a carrier and sleeping through the entire event. Eleanor unveiled the dedication plaque, a simple piece of bronze with clean lettering. "For every woman who was told she had nothing, you have everything you need. You always did." Vivian had written those words herself late one night, while Grace was crying in the other room, and she was so tired she could barely see. She wrote them down and knew that they were true, not just for the women who would find a home here, but for herself as well. The whole time, even in her darkest moments, even in that courthouse bathroom, when she wanted to quit, she had everything she needed. She had the strength to survive, the love to keep herself going, and the courage to start all over again. After the ceremony was over, Vivian drove home with Grace, babbling happily in the car seat behind her. The house felt quiet and peaceful, and it was full of light. She fed Grace, changed her diaper, and rocked her in her grandmother's chair until she drifted off to sleep. Then Vivian went and sat on the back porch, watching as the sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. She thought about Harrison. She found herself doing that less and less these days. The criminal trial was moving forward, with both federal and state charges. Wesley was testifying, and so was Amber, along with a dozen other former employees who had finally found the courage to tell their stories. Harrison was probably going to prison. It could be for many years. Vivian had stopped following the news about it. She was far too busy building something new. Her architecture firm had reopened. It was small for now, with just Vivian and 2 associates. But it was growing. They had 3 projects in development, with more waiting in the pipeline. The shelter was just the first. There would be many others. "I used to think strength meant enduring things," she told Marlene one evening. "It meant staying quiet, holding everything together, and never showing any weakness. And what about now? Now, I think real strength is standing up for yourself, walking away from what is breaking you, and starting over, even when it is the most terrifying thing you can do." Marlene had raised her wine glass in a toast to terrifying new beginnings. The sunset finally faded from the sky. The first stars began to appear. The evening air started to turn cool. Vivian went back inside and checked on Grace, who was still sleeping soundly. Perfect. She climbed into her own bed, a bed that she had picked out herself, in a room that she had decorated herself, in a life that she was building all by herself. The baby monitor on the nightstand gave off a soft glow. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, and more moments of self-doubt. But tonight, there was only peace. Vivian closed her eyes. The prison door she had been trapped behind had been unlocked the entire time. She had been her own warden. But now she was free. And she was learning that freedom felt a lot like grace. 1 year later, a letter showed up at Vivian's office. It had no return address and was handwritten. Vivian knew that handwriting instantly. It was from Harrison. Her first instinct was to throw it away without even opening it, almost. Instead, she sat down at her desk, holding the letter in her hands. She opened it. Vivian, I know that you do not want to hear from me. I know that I have no right to contact you, but I am writing this letter anyway. The trial is over. You probably already know that. 7 years in a federal prison. I will be 60 years old when I get out. I have had a lot of time to think about everything that I did, about who I was, and about the man that I became. I am not writing to you to ask for your forgiveness. I know that I do not deserve it. I am not writing to make any excuses for my actions. There are none. I am writing because I finally understand what I truly lost. It was not the money, not the company, and not even my own freedom. I lost you. I had someone who loved me without any conditions. Someone who trusted me, who would have stood right by my side through anything, and I destroyed all of it, on purpose. Piece by piece, because I thought I could, because I thought I was untouchable. I was wrong. I hope that Grace is healthy. I hope that she is happy. I hope that she grows up to be just like her mother, strong, kind, and so much better than I ever was. I am not asking to be a part of her life. I know that I gave up that right. But I do hope that someday you might tell her that her father was not always a monster, that once, a very long time ago, he was capable of love, even if he forgot how to show it. I am sorry. Harrison. Vivian read the letter 2 times, then she placed it in her desk drawer, along with the divorce papers and the court documents, all the proof of a life she had now left far behind. She looked at the picture on her desk. A bright memory cut through the pain. Grace on her first birthday, her face a mess of birthday cake as she giggled with pure joy. Someday, Vivian would have to tell her daughter about her father. She would explain everything, the wonderful man he once was and the monster he became. But that day was not today. Right now she had a purpose. She had buildings to bring to life, other women to lift up, and a beautiful daughter to raise. Vivian pushed herself to her feet and walked to the window, gazing down at the sprawling city. From there, she could see the shelter she had built, its windows glinting in the afternoon sun. Tucked away in a drawer behind her was a letter, the last words, from a man who had no more deceptions left to give. After watching the sunlight dance on the skyline, Vivian turned with renewed determination and went back to her drafting table. She had important work to finish. If this story moved you in any way, please do us a small kindness and press the like button. It helps our videos find more women who need to be reminded of their own inner power. We would love to hear from you in the comments. Was there ever a time you thought you were completely on your own, only to learn someone was fighting for you behind the scenes? Please share this with a friend who needs to be told that she is not broken. She is simply preparing for her comeback. And if you have not already, please subscribe and become part of our community. Each week, we share new stories meant to make you smile. to let you cry, and to show you why you should never, ever give up. Our team takes great care to research, write, and edit every story we produce, crafting each word to offer genuine lessons and powerful emotional connection for our audience. We are firm believers in the power of stories to mend our hearts, spark our spirits, and uncover the strength we already possess. We are so grateful that you have joined us on this journey.